Recently I made a review video on the new Tamron 50 to 400mm lens for the Nikon Z mount, and quite a number of you left questions in the comments. In this video I'll answer those questions and give you some more insights about the lens. First of all, thank you to those who did leave questions in that Tamron 50 to 400mm review video. I do appreciate it. Without further ado, I'm going to answer those questions for you. Well, I'm going to do my best anyway to answer those questions for you. Can the Tamron 50 to 400mm Z mount lens be used in conjunction with the Nikon 1.4 and 2x teleconverters? Unfortunately, no, it can't. There's just no room at the rear element to mount it, and actually got confirmation from this from Tamron Australia. How would the Tamron 50 to 400mm compare to the Nikon Z 28 to 400mm lens and the older Nikon 80 to 400mm f-mount lens? I've actually made a video comparing the new Tamron 50 to 400mm Z mount lens to that older Nikon 80 to 400mm f-mount lens, and if you haven't seen it yet, what I'll do is I'll leave it at the end of this video that you can check out a little bit later on. But in terms of how the Tamron compares to the Nikon Z 28 to 400mm, and I was actually speaking to the Tamron rep about this when he picked up the lens from me, it's not really in the same class. The Nikon Z 28 to 400mm is more of a compact lens, like a one and done or an all-rounder lens for traveling, etc. What you should be realistically doing is comparing that to the Tamron 28 to 300mm f4 to 7.1 lens. It's actually available in the Sony E mount at the moment, so it's not available in the Z mount as yet. The Tamron 50 to 400mm isn't really a one and done lens, I think. It's just not wide enough at that short end at 50mm. Where the Tamron 50 to 400mm would be more in the class of is, say, up against the Nikon Z 100 to 400mm lens. Now, price-wise, the Tamron beats that Nikon 100 to 400mm, and I believe the Tamron would be sharper at the long end than that Nikon. But I will endeavour to do my best though, because I would actually like to compare all three of those lenses, and I will do a future video on that. Is the Tamron 50 to 400mm weather sealed? The Tamron 50 to 400mm lens is weather sealed, but just be aware at the rear of the lens there's an exposed USB-C port. You use that USB-C port for things like firmware updates and for other things via the Tamron Lens Utility app. I think you can buy USB-C port covers pretty cheaply off eBay if you wanted to put your mind at ease if you were out in rougher weather and you didn't want that USB-C port exposed. How does the Tamron 50 to 400mm compare to the Tamron 150 to 500mm in terms of image quality, and does it have the same VC stabilization issues as the 150 to 500mm? That's actually a very good question, that one. I have actually used the Tamron 150 to 500mm before, and I would say in comparing it to the Tamron 50 to 400mm, I think the 50 to 400mm is just that little bit better in image quality, but not by much. I'm talking just ever so fractionally. When it comes to that VC or vibration compensation issue, particularly at the long end, the answer is yes. I actually did get the same issue of stabilization I was getting on the 150 to 500mm. I'm just going to run some vision here filming this Kookaburra in 4K at 25 frames per second handheld. Now this is with my Nikon Z7 with the Tamron 50 to 400mm at 400mm. Whether that little flick or jitter at the long end of the focal range is something to do with perhaps my older Nikon Z7, I'm just not sure. If someone does own that Tamron 150 to 500mm and you're using it on, say, a Z8 or a Z9, just let me and others know in the comments below if you're getting that same sort of jitter with the VC activated on the lens. I noticed in your review there wasn't a tripod collar on the lens. Good spotting, that is correct. You don't actually get a tripod collar with this new Tamron 50 to 400mm. I checked all through the box and I couldn't see anything. And I noticed on the Tamron Australia website, you can actually buy a tripod collar as an optional accessory. And the good news is, it comes with an Arca Swiss mount. What's the distortion and focus breathing like? To be honest, I really didn't actually specifically test for that on this Tamron lens. But from my user experience and the results I was getting, it was pretty impressive all round in terms of sharpness, even in the corners at both the short and long end of the focal range. And the super quick acquisition of focus due to that Tamron VXT focus motor, it was pretty impressive. Nothing really to do with the lens per se, but at that 5:30 mark, was that a photo of a snake? No, it's not a snake. Actually, it's a blue tongue lizard. I have a heap of them living outside my garden here, just outside my studio, and they're quite harmless. But trust me, if that was a snake, I wouldn't be anywhere near it. Snakes just scare the living pants off of me, especially here in Australia. They're quite venomous. The last time I had a bit of a run-in with a snake, head to head, yeah, well, I won that fight by about 100 meters. Gone. I was out of there. I know if I was traveling or shooting landscape with this Tamron 50-400mm, I'd be really wanting to use it in conjunction with a wide-angle prime or an ultra-wide zoom, something like the Nikon 20mm f1.8s or the Nikon 14-30mm f4S lens. I mentioned in my initial review video, I think maybe in the future we may see the Tamron 17-50mm f4 lens, which is available in the Sony E-mount at the moment, eventually come to the Nikon Z-mount. Then that would be an amazing combo to have in your camera bag. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope this video has answered some of your questions regarding the new Tamron 50-400mm Z-mount lens. I'll see you next time.